Hi, Rav. Welcome to the Teacher's Point of View podcast. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, I've known you for a very long time, but it would be great if you can start off by kind of sharing your journey, your experience in teaching, what made you get into it, and kind of where you're at now.
Hi TJ, thanks for having me. We have known each other for a really long time. I've kind of known you for your whole life. It's because we're siblings, aren't we? Thanks for having me on and asking me. I know you've interviewed some really amazing people. I'm really looking forward to listening to those podcasts. But it's really lovely being able to talk about my own experiences and the teaching world with you, really, and because you're my family. So thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. So, talk to me about your journey then. Like, what made you get into teaching?
Oh wow. My journey, I guess it's an interesting one because I kind of didn't go straight into teaching. And I think in some ways that served me quite well because I had my children first. And I think having my children kind of gave me a different perspective really, because I get it. And I say this every day, even in my kind of everyday teaching, I'll say to my teens, I get it. I know what it's like from the other perspective. So I went into teaching kind of after in my late 20s. So I came with a bit more kind of real life experience. I'd worked in other industries like banking, but I kind of know what it was like to work really hard because I had my children and finished off my degree. Life didn't quite kind of go the way I initially planned it to. So, I did my degree while the children were really, really young, putting them to bed at 7 and working till like 1-2 o'clock every morning. And that's how I did my degree and then went into teaching. So I've been teaching over like 10 years now. And I've kind of worked in a whole range of schools. So I started my career off in Dartford, where I trained quite a deprived area, deprived schools. But I worked at 2 different schools there. And one of the schools that I trained at was one of these schools that kind of pilot everything. So when I first got my very first experience teaching, is quite amusing because it was like team teaching. So I had like 7 teachers just at the back of the room staring at me. I had a microphone and I had to like teach and stand in front of like 60 children. So if that was enough to put me off, I don't know what was. But then I moved on to another school, which is an all-girls school, quite a deprived area. So I learned a lot there. And then just moved around in Havering, which is where I live. Amazing borough. We've got a whole range of children here. But I think the biggest thing I've picked up in this borough is like aspirations. So that's kind of like something that means a lot to me. So I've worked in about 3 different schools here now. And I'm currently at a school in Hornchurch, which is an RI school. So that's kind of been my journey. And I'm SLT now. So I've just moved my way up across the schools as you do. So I went from being a teacher to taking on lots of things in school, like responsibilities like student voice and things like that. And then moved on to middle leadership, and then moved on to senior leadership.
I mean, you've had quite a remarkable career. And one of the things that I love most about you is the fact that you have this massive connection with these children. I remember in your first like proper school when you were there for a long period of time, you got so connected with these kids, and you were like, no, I'm going to sacrifice my progression. I'm going to see these kids out, and I'm going to make sure that they're getting through year 11. And I remember you coming back, and you were telling me like how emotional you got on your last day, and you were in tears at one point, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I actually went into the toilet and sobbed the last time I said goodbye to my form. Honestly, I cannot tell you the way these children get to you. It is absolutely the best profession in the world. There is no other job like it where, even now, I still think about my form. In my study, I've got my first form and I've still got like the poem that they wrote me, and I've got a card that they all made me and wrote messages. It's in my office at work. I will never forget those children. And you're right, I sobbed my eyes out, didn't I?
You
Yeah.
did, but you wanted to obviously progress, right? And obviously that was a pretty small school, so there was no room for like nobody really left it. Like they had a really low turnover of staff, and you had to kind of make that move for your career, and you kind of take on a key stage coordinator role. You kind of went through the curriculum-based progression, didn't you? You kind of went to Key Stage 3 coordinator, Key Stage 4, and then was it second in charge pretty much of English as well, wasn't it? And
yeah, it was definitely English, yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually you kind of went from that, which was like sort of like middle leadership, like boardroom middle leadership, and straight to where you are now, the school in Hornchurch, and you went to assistant head. I mean, like how did that go about?
Yeah, it was quite, it's quite a remarkable journey. I think, I've absolutely, for me, my priority has always been the classroom, the kids. That is why you go into teaching. There is no other reason, honestly. It's not for the pay, it's not for anything else. You do it because those kids are just so inspirational. We were talking about my film a little while ago, but one of the things I said to them on their leaving day, which will always stay with me because their faces, they were so lovely. And they said to me, I said to them, we're supposed to come into school every day and inspire you. But actually, every day I've come into work, it's you that's inspired me. And I just think, that is why we do it. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave the school I was at. But I think, especially this is a bit of advice for early career teachers, is that, when you move around, you learn so much. What I've learned in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there is absolutely no way I would have learned that staying at the same school that I was at. So yeah, I did go into middle leadership, and the idea was to progress slowly and try and different things. But I went to visit the school that I'm at, and I absolutely fell in love, and it was with all the students. It was quite again an area that is quite deprived, and the kids need that good teaching and learning, and that's always been a real passion of mine, like being in the classroom. And I don't mean this in to brag, but I think I've always been a really good teacher. It just comes quite naturally, and I really love it, and being in front of the kids, and I feel like they always show progress, and that's what really inspires me. And so when this role came along, I went for it. I'll be honest, I didn't think I was going to get it. I really, really didn't, because I don't think I was ready. Even now, I've been in this role nearly 2 years, and I still don't feel like I'm ready for it. So this year I've started the MPQSL. Fantastic. My head's fantastic, and he's invested in me in order to help me progress. So I'm doing that now, and I'm already starting to learn lots. So I still feel like I'm not quite ready, but I've learned so much, and that's what I mean. So moving from school to school is always a really, really good idea. I think it's really easy to stay, it's comfortable, but I think like anything in life, if you want to be challenged, you've got to find that challenge. Otherwise you get bored and you just get stuck, I think. And it was really hard leaving, because again, I was comfortable, I had an amazing team, and I went to another school, and perhaps I just realised that maybe that wasn't the school I was going to stay at forever. But here at this school, I just feel like I never want to leave. The kids are amazing, and we are an RI school. It is really, really hard. It's been really hard work. When I got there, we didn't have policies in place. We didn't, it was really hard. I've co-written so many of those policies myself. But we were in a really good position already. In a year and a half, I could see so much progression, and I work with such an amazing team. And I am the least qualified in that team, the least experienced. So every day I go in, I feel like I'm learning so much from my colleagues, and they're a real inspiration. I've picked up so much from them, if I ever moved to another school, I feel like I'd take all that with me. So it's all about learning. It's been a huge learning curve for me.
Perfect. I mean, what have been the biggest obstacles that you faced during your time in teaching? I mean, did you have people that kind of slammed the door in your face when you wanted to progress? I mean, how difficult was it to get to where you got to?
It's been hard. I think the first school or the second school that I was in for quite a long time was an amazing school, and no one ever left. And I always felt there was, I don't want to say this in a negative way, but there's a bit of a queue, isn't there, before you. So I knew that if I stayed, that I would never progress, and I was so eager and hungry, and always took on lots of responsibilities. Not because they were given to me in terms of TLR, but I just wanted to do stuff. I was so so passionate about stuff, but I just knew that in the end, if I wanted to get to know my own worth, I suppose, and have people worth, I guess, accept what I was going to bring, then I would have to move. So that was quite difficult, actually. And then so it has been tricky. And I think it's what I've always found really interesting, but in a way that I've always loved, is the demographics of the areas and the schools that I've been in. Maybe this might not be hugely relevant, but I've worked in very white dominant schools, and so I always felt like that for me was a real educational perspective as well. I didn't just go in as a teacher. kids made assumptions about me, but the minute you open your mouth and they realise, oh, she's from Essex, that's all right. You know, she's fine. They stop seeing colour, and I've had some really interesting conversations with students. So I think, you know, we forget that us being teachers are not just about what we teach in terms of curriculum, but it's about educating kids about the world that we live in. And I think that's been some of my favourite bits. I'm sorry, I've diverted. I don't even remember what your question was, TJ. We're a chatty family, aren't we?
What were your obstacles? I mean, like, you said that even going into schools, the children looked at your skin colour before you spoke, right? I mean, did you find that's the same with colleagues?
Not really. I think, you know, I think people, I've been really lucky to be working with some really amazing people. Even now, you know, I've got some fantastic colleagues. And I think I was really lucky, because one of the things that teachers have, you know, I've picked up in my time in teaching, and people say there's never really been enough training or getting out to courses and stuff. But I think I've been really lucky with that. I think right from the beginning, when I was at my schools, I just feel like my leaders have always really believed in me, you know, and that's been fantastic. Not a lot of teachers get that. So I was always chosen to go on courses and do leadership courses, even when I wasn't even a middle leader. So I just feel like I've had some really brilliant experiences. I've been able to network with some fantastic people. So I haven't actually had the obstacles that are, you know, that maybe some teachers face. But I think one of the things, again, I said this earlier, was maybe the biggest obstacle was trying to move up in one school. And I think if you really want to progress and you're hungry and you know you're really career driven, then that's not always possible in the same school.
Fantastic. Talk to me about the last 7 months. I mean, how difficult has it been? Just before you do that though, like, talk to me about the kids and like the areas that like they're from, and the families, like the sort of financial income, and how it's been affected over COVID.
Yeah. Well, where do I start, TJ? It's been really hard, you know, and I think one of the things about teachers, I think you won't go into profession if you weren't compassionate and you didn't care about those kids. And I think that has been the biggest thing, because we know we are sending children home. When we had the isolation period, when we all had to stay at home, I mean, that was really hard. I was sat at home and I was worrying constantly about our students and whether they were going to get fed or if they had food, and some of our very vulnerable students. And in fact, being at home was harder for them than anything, you know. And I think the strain in terms of mental health, I know it's not mental health awareness, but that's all it is it's awareness. I don't think you realise how many people are actually the extent of that suffering. You know, I'm not I'm part of the safeguarding team. You know, everyone is, but I don't lead at that in my school. But I cannot tell you the amount of hours our safeguarding lead has spent doing home visits. I mean, I remember her telling me stories about meeting kids and going for walks with them just to get them out of the house, just to be that buffer. And I think you don't realise how much teachers are going way beyond their role in order to support these kids. You know, food packages. We had our brilliant catering staff coming in every day doing food packages. We would go and deliver those. You know, I've delivered myself like laptops to students' houses. And whatever it takes, you know, these teachers have done it. So I think, you know, we don't realise the work that goes on behind the scenes. And I know we're always the first to kind of pick on teachers. I mean, there's been so much support out there, but it's been really hard work, because it's not just the physical aspect. Like, I don't think you realise how much in terms of all the policies and things that you have to have in place. It's crazy. Like the risk assessments, they're everywhere. You have to have a risk assessment for everything. So that's been really hard. All the systems and processes that you have in place. You know, I was saying to you that when our RI school, and we've finally had all our systems processes in place. We're making progress, and then suddenly it's like, actually, none of that matters anymore. We have to start again. So, you know, our chance to kind of like show that progress and move forward has just been like a bit of a standstill. It is literally about functioning and getting through. You know, let's not even start on budgets and expenses. You know, we're probably spending 2.5-3 grand just on like wipes and sanitizing equipment every month just for the classroom. So it is a lot of money, and that money could have been on books and textbooks and, you know, filtering back into the classroom. So I know we're not the only one, obviously, in that situation, but again, I guess the point is that there's so much that's going on behind the scenes that you don't even realise. In terms of our demographics, and I know you were, I kind of mentioned this already, but some of our children really cannot afford to eat every day. You know, they really rely on our free school meals programme. So even this week, we've looked at the kids that need those food parcels and have arranged them if need be. Laptops. That's been an issue for us because we can't afford to go and buy loads, but our government have sent us some, but it's nowhere near enough what we need. So already it's not an even playing field. I mean, it's never going to be, so let's be honest, but it's been really hard work because all you have then is that reliance on distance learning. And if they're not getting that, then they're already on the back foot, you know. So yeah, it's hard.
How difficult is it to keep these kids on track with their learning, with how disadvantaged some of them are?
It's really hard, TJ, because, you know, how do you monitor? I mean, we're a relatively small school, so God knows we got a school where it's like, you know, 1,000+ children. It has been really hard. So we are so good in terms of tracking that. You know, we've got, like I said, I've got some brilliant colleagues who've already got Excel sheets in place. We're making phone calls all the time. We've got a whole system and process in place. Should we shut down completely or partially? We've got a whole distance learning policy in place. All teachers know what they should be doing. So, for example, we had to send our cohort of year 11s home last week. So straight away, you know, we were on there. So when they have lessons, we are teaching online. But again, the issue with that is not everyone can get online. Not all, you know, when they're in class, you can make, you know, you have strategies in place. They're there physically, you can make them do it effectively. But you can't force a child that you cannot see to go online and meet you for a lesson. So, you know, there are massive challenges with that. And that's why the government investing in catch-up programs has been a really good idea. I think we needed that. At my school, we have a period 6 that we've introduced this year. It's intervention, but it's catch-up. So we are catching up with Key Stage 4, what they've missed previously. But it's not easy. I can't think of a perfect solution here. So I think what we're going to have to do is find later on, when we kind of come back to relative normality, is then find solutions and work our way back. But it is hard. It's not going to be perfect. Obviously, I feel very sorry for our year 11s. I think they are obviously the ones that are going to be impacted the most, especially because you don't know what's going to happen in the near future.
It's scary, isn't it? I mean, it's a very, very difficult time. It's really difficult when the government aren't even offering these kids free school meals. I mean, it's really difficult to get ample amounts of like laptops from like them to be able to give to these kids. I mean, how do you work with that? You know, like, I mean, if these kids have got to sit exams next summer, how do you get them prepared for that?
Gosh, there are so many, like I said, there are so many systems and processes we have in place. So first thing is you need to track and monitor that. How do you know which kids are not working, why they're not working? So we know this is where you really lean on all your teaching staff, all your pastoral teams. We've got people phoning home. Like I said, if there was a complete isolation, we've already got, you know, all our teams in place. So we will be making phone calls home to every single student. No one gets left behind. Go from year 7 all the way to year 11. See if there are any issues. We track. So, for example, if we see kids have not logging onto Google Classroom, but then maybe even log into one, teachers track that. So then we can go, right, look on the system and say, well, this child is not doing their geography at all. Why is that? And then we go and speak to that child or families. So every single child matters at this point. I mean, they always do. But in this case, you know, it's about having really strategic like systems in place and processes in place and making sure everyone knows what they're doing. I think that organisation and preparation is the key. And I feel like I said, we've got such a good team that everyone's on it and we are ready in case something happens or we do need to go into either partial or full closure. So yeah, preparation. But again, there's no perfect system here. There will be people that not get lost as such, but going to need that extra support. We've invested in like more intervention, so we're bringing external people in for more mentoring and intervention after the half term as well. So hopefully that's going to really help. But most schools, every school, I'm sure, is doing whatever they can to bring in support and put things in place for all of their students, especially at Key Stage 4 who really need it. You're right, they've got the exams in the summer. It's not that long.
Yeah, and like with Sanders, obviously you've been there for about a year and a half, a year and a half, haven't you? And coming up to like in this journey that you've been on, it must be so difficult as an RI school to have this like sort of plan ahead of you of what you want to do, like where you wanted to get to, and then you get hit with COVID, and it's a massive stumbling block, isn't it? And like obviously nobody's really prepared for it. Like, I remember you telling me a couple of weeks ago, parents have called us up, and it's like, we've literally just heard the news when you have, like just give us a couple of days to sort this out. It's like, how will that affect your ability to go from RI to good? Like, does it make it, obviously it makes it that much more difficult, but how much more difficult does it make it?
Quite difficult. Yeah, you're right. So we find out things just as everyone else does. So it's not like we've got lots of time or preparation to put things in place. But you know what? I'm actually, even though it's hard, I'm actually quite what's the word I'm looking for? I think we're doing quite well. We are doing quite well on a personal perspective, though. I'm in charge of teaching and learning at my school, and one of the first things I had to do when I came in was actually go, right, what do we expect to see in classrooms? What is our teaching and learning policy? What are we expecting? And you can't just come out with this stuff out of thin air. You look at those, look at our children. What is it that our children need? You look at the curriculum, you go, are we meeting that? What are our priorities nationally in our borough? So you kind of put all this stuff together. And so last year, or last term, it's so hard to have all these things in place. And then we've got here and it's like, hold on, all that stuff needs to be put on the back burner. And it's really quite frustrating for me because I want to track it, I want to monitor it and go, right, what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, what needs to change? Let's how are we tracking and monitoring teaching? Things like basic things like doing formal observations, all of that has kind of now gone. And we can arguably say teaching and learning is the most important, apart from safeguarding, it's probably the most important thing in the school. But at the moment, we're just trying to go, right, well, stay behind the line. You can't go near children. You can't do this, wear your mask. And it's become this whole, like, school's like a military operation and a function. And all those priorities that I really think are important for our school, because you have priorities and you make sure they're in your curriculum and they're in your lesson planning and stuff like that. But it's so hard to monitor because even when I go out for my learning walks, I can't walk into a classroom, go start looking at students' books. All that safeguarding health and safety comes first, and rightly so. But I guess there's that frustration that I want to be seeing that progress, and it's really hard to actually physically see it. So we're doing the best that we can. We've adapted our learning walks and things like that, where it's scrutiny, so that it's not so formal, because actually teachers have got a lot of pressure on them. So we don't want to come and bombard them with more, because they're brilliant, they're working so hard. So we don't want to be the ones going, right, now we're going to do formal observation, so make sure you're ready, because they don't need that extra pressure. But they will be, it is frustrating, especially in RI school, because now's the chance to see that progress. And I just realised that we're perhaps not going to see it in the way that we want to. That doesn't mean that progress isn't happening. There are ways of tracking that, but it's just that much more harder now, I suppose.
Sure. With obviously everything going on and difficulties that you're finding in schools, like what do you need from the government? Like, what do you need from the people above to help you in this difficult time?
Money. Just you take anything, wouldn't you? To be honest, TJ, I'm not working for the government. I think we can all sit here and say, oh, they're doing this and they're doing that, but until you're in it, like I used to always go, I wonder what SLT do, in all those meetings, and until you're part of that, you don't actually realise all the work that goes on behind the scenes. And actually, it's not always, there's no perfect solution always, and there's always lots of issues, and it's never that easy. But but money, we need to buy, we need to make sure all our students have access to internet. We can give them a laptop. If they don't have Wi-Fi, they can't get online. Making sure that our kids are eating, all those basic things that we need just to function now as a society in this new kind of distant world that we're in. We need that. We need not to be able to take $3,000 out a month on hand sanitizers and reinvest that in our education. We need teachers to be doing intervention. We need more teachers to have time one-to-one with students, because there is, we try not to bombard our students with really negative terminology like, you're so far behind, because no one wants to hear that, and that's not positive. But what we want to make sure is that every child, no matter where their starting point is, that they are showing progress. And unfortunately, I can see it already that some kids have not learnt enough in the time, or have made enough progress in the time since this whole COVID's happened. So it is hard. We need money. We need to be able to invest back time and teachers and learning for those students, and it's not easy because students are coming back. What I've really struggled with, as an example, is that, my year 11s, a few weeks ago, after we got back, I asked them to do a bit of group work, and it was like pulling teeth. I mean, this is like basic, but they just couldn't, because they've just got into this zone of being on their own, and when they're together they just want to talk about other stuff. So it's like we just need to re-educate and retrain our students in how to have like classroom etiquette. And I know it's nothing major, but actually it's all about time, and they need to be in the classroom. And I know people feel very differently about that because of everything that's going on, especially right now with the spike. But, there is missed learning, and we need to reinvest time and money into that to make sure all our kids are progressing.
Absolutely. I mean, it must be so hard to be a teacher right now. And I've spoken to a few people, and there's this misconception that teachers haven't done anything for the last 7 months, right? And they've been on holiday, so I don't know what they're complaining about. I mean, how hard are teachers working at the moment? Like, how important is it that people understand that what teachers are doing is, like, not only are they risking their lives every day on being on the front line, but they're sacrificing the people that they can meet. I mean, you don't even come over anymore, right? I mean, you don't get to see mum and dad. Like, when was the last time you came over? And it's scary because you don't want to pass anything on, and it's because you are going in and, like, you're sacrificing your time with the people that you love because you want to care for these kids and you want to do your, like, job, And I mean, how difficult is it for teachers overall to be a teacher right now?
Well, it's not easy, but you know what? I can guarantee that every teacher that is coming into school and is standing in front of those kids is because they really care about those students, and that is it. There is no other reason why we go in to do our job. Is because we love what we do, and it's about the passion that we have, and we believe in education, we believe in learning. And you're right, you do miss out on normal things, and I think that's what people don't realise. People talk about isolation as taking new hobbies. Like, look at mum, she's become a painter in the last 5 months, but I've not had one pyjama day, not one, since last Christmas. Because you are, and I'll be honest, hand on heart, I will say to you, TJ, that I am not the most hardworking person in my team. I know I've got people on my team that work until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, making sure the systems are in place, making sure things are happening as they should. And I don't even work that hard. And you can see, I never see you guys because I'm always working. So that is just, I guess, an example of how hard some people work. Teachers are working really hard because actually everything that we want them to do, we're kind of now saying, right, we're not doing that now, we're doing this. So everyone's learning, everyone's going to make mistakes. I sometimes forget, and I walked around the corridor the other day and I forgot my mask. We all make mistakes, but it's like we're having to relearn everything. And I think that in itself is a challenge. But teachers are coming in. We've got teachers that are vulnerable but still come in, because those kids are priority, and that you cannot ask for more. What teachers are giving up every day and sacrificing is just really commendable. It really is. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a teacher, just looking on the hard work that goes on. Like, they've had to change their habits, like taking books home. I've gone in, it's half term, I've gone in today so I can mark all my year 8 assessments, because I can't take their books home. and things like that. So it's like everyone's making adjustments and coming in more, or trying to find ways around it. And don't forget, we've got our own children. A lot of teachers. I've got 3 teenagers myself, so as you know, so it's trying to find the right balance, because you'll get emails going, oh, there's been a case at their school, and then you're like, I've got to try and manage all of those, and it's not easy. It's not easy, definitely not.
It's crazy, isn't it? Like the PGCE students that are training this year, how is it? Like, if you were to describe what it's like to be a PGCE student compared to other years, like, what do you think they're going through at the moment, and what do you think they're thinking?
Wow. Thing is, in some ways it's probably a little bit easier because they don't know any different. They're coming in, doing their PGCE, and this is the new system and new thing in place. And every school's different. So all I would say is just learn everything that you can, while you're there. It's not going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like this forever. But learn what you can, still go out and still watch other teachers, take the experiences that you can from this, from any kind of normal that you can. I remember training many, many years ago, and you just lap up everything because you want to learn and you're so eager and hungry. So still find that, because yes, it's not normal at the moment, but it will be one day. You will go back to that and you will find new strategies. And something I'm a really strong believer in is you never ever stop learning ever. I'm like I said, I'm doing my NPQSL this year, and I'm always training. I was just in Ofsted training the other day. And I guess that's what I'm saying. You're so early in your career. You've got so much time to learn and to grow as a teacher. And one of the best things about this moment for you, I suppose, as a PGCE student, would be that you can practice things that you wouldn't necessarily get to do in other situations. So, for example, checking progress by standing in front of the class. There are so many ways and strategies in your questioning. You can really strengthen those skills. And there's so much you can do just by being at the front of the classroom. So even me, I'm having to go, right, okay, because I'm someone who walks around. I never sit when I teach, and I'll go and sit next to the kids, and I'm there, always moving around. And so I've had to redevelop my strategy to make sure that my questioning is spot on, so I can check every student's progress every single lesson. That's not easy when you've got 25 students sitting in front of you. So, use this scenario to really tighten, strengthen the skills that you can. And as you move through your career, you'll find that in different scenarios, different schools, when we're relatively back to normal, that you will get better at those other things that you might not be able to necessarily practice now.
Yeah. Obviously, it's very different though, isn't it? In previous years, you'd be teaching them to be a presence in the classroom, walk around, and they're coming into your classroom, and the mindset is so different. Obviously, I was speaking to John a little bit earlier, and John Tate, sorry, and he was sort of saying that the mindset is so different. You're walking into their space and you're going into their territory. So if you don't get something going straight away, you're going to lose them, and it's crazy. It's because you, as a PTC student, you're almost going to have to rewire your brain when things go back to normal, aren't you? I mean, and the PTC students from last year, they only had half a year of training, so they're coming into this year, basically having to forget everything that they learned last year, and basically start again almost, aren't they? I mean, how difficult is it going to be for them?
Yeah, it is going to be difficult, but you know what? I just think there's so much positivity around that as well, because you're, like I said earlier, you're always learning, you're always changing. And so, yes, they might have learned a new way now, and they're strengthening certain areas now, and they have to work on certain things. But, you could go to another school and be completely different. Like, I went from a relatively mixed, affluent school to a school that was very deprived. I worked in an all-girls school. I was having to constantly change my teaching style. But I think that's the best thing. I think you should be able to try different things, otherwise you get stuck in the same way. And, if you're teaching the same way in 10 years, then you're not really an effective teacher, because kids change. You have to be adaptable. And I think that's one of the greatest things about our profession, that it's not boring, and I think standing in front of the classroom, what better way to work on your presence in the classroom as a teacher?
Yeah.
Because normally can go to them and go, right, you know, I've told you to stop talking, or, you know, you can have that one-to-one, but actually you've got to be present. And I think as a new teacher, to work on that right now, and that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah,
Take
absolutely.
advantage of it.
What advice would you give them? I mean, anybody that's kind of come into this year, or graduates that have finished last year that are thinking about going into teaching at the moment. I mean, what does recruitment look like for schools, and like how important is it that we get teachers into the industry?
Really important, TJ. You know, I've been on countless like interviews and observations and seen teachers, especially new teachers. You know what always stands out to me personally is passion. Everything else you can teach. You know, you can work on your questioning skills. You can work on how to do Greek work. You can work on your curriculum. Even, you know, sometimes teachers don't always come with the best curriculum knowledge, or, you know, in their subject. But when you have a teacher that stands in front of those kids and has passion, you could spot that a mile off, and you can't buy that. And I think that, you know, otherwise it's death by PowerPoint. Anyone can stand up and teach a PowerPoint, but I think those kids are invested in you when you really believe in what you're doing, what you're teaching. And I think for me, that is the most important thing that I would look for. Everything else you can work on, but, you know, a teacher really having drive and passion and wanting to be there and make a difference, that is the most important thing to me.
So imagine I'm an NQT, or I'm a BGCE teacher trainee at the moment, and I've come and I've done my lesson observation. You like the way I taught. Actually, just before I ask that question, what would you look for in their lesson observation? Like, what would make them stand out? Because like it is difficult, right? You've got 2 meters that you can kind of stay within, right? And it's very hard to be animated and enthusiastic in that confined space. I mean, what would you be looking for anybody that comes in and sort of interviews with your school?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one because it's not realistic. But I think we've got to take that with a pinch of salt, because I think no matter whether we have this COVID or not, I think, you know, interviews and lesson observations for interviews are always a bit superficial, aren't they? Because you're teaching for half an hour and you don't know those kids. I think the best teachers are the ones that know their students, and you can clearly see this relationship. That is the best lessons. And, you know, you've got someone who's coming, doesn't know those children, you know, is going, yes, you know, doesn't know their name. So, you know, you always take those kind of interview lessons with a bit of pinch of salt. So what you're always looking for, which hasn't changed now, is, you know, there's a presence, again, passion, and making sure that what they're teaching, one, can show progress for the students, so they've actually learned something in those 20 minutes or half an hour, but also that it's relevant to the curriculum that they're supposed to be teaching. Like, know your subject. If you're teaching something, know what it is that you want to teach and what you want those students to learn by the end of it, because that's all lessons ever about, isn't it? It's about students progressing. Ultimately, that is what you want to achieve. So if you can make sure that your subject matter is relevant to what you're trying to teach, and the outcomes for those students are really, really clear, and they've shown clear progression, then you're onto a winner. But again, if I was in the back of the room watching a lesson, what I want to see is those kids are listening and they're engaged, however that might be. You know, I've seen so many teachers, some are completely don't even talk in a lesson, it's so student led, and that's hard to master. And some are very, you know, kind of Victorian teaching stand up, like we are all doing now at the moment, actually, because of COVID. But, you know, I'll stand in front of them. It doesn't matter. It does not matter what style of teaching that you prefer. As long as your kids are learning and they're progressing, that's all that matters. Be passionate. Honestly, that really stands out.
Fantastic. And like in terms of them getting jobs, do you think there'll be a lot of movement next year? I mean, do you think a lot of vacancies will come up?
Oh, your guess is good as mine. I think, you know, it is really hard because of the whole movement this year with PGCE students and your Teach First students, etc. You know, there are gaps, but I haven't, if I'm being honest, TJ, I couldn't tell you statistics. I don't know. I don't know where the gaps are. I mean, all I can see is the amount of agencies that contact us. I'm assuming there's lots of people that are looking for positions. So, yeah, I'm sure there will be. We need teachers. You know, there's always going to be gaps. There's always all your usual subjects, like your math, science, English, always going to need teachers. Geography teachers as well. Can't seem to find any. But there's always going to be gaps. So, yeah, it's it's one of those professions where it's never going to die out, is it? So I'd always encourage people that are passionate about their subject to go into teaching, definitely. I don't think you'd ever not be able to find a job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like through my 6 years experience, I've seen the level of teachers kind of decrease over the years. I mean, I think it was in 2016 there was 48,000 teachers that left the industry, only 26,000 NQTs that came into the industry, and that left us with a deficit of about 22,000. And it's crazy statistics of how many teachers actually leave the industry, and more than ever with everything that's going on, and like with children from these disadvantaged families, and it just highlights that in a first world country like the UK, how much of a gap there is, and how much more we need teachers in this industry making a difference for these future generation that come from these sort of deprived areas, And I think ultimately that's what this podcast is about: is to create awareness of how hard teachers are working, because unfortunately it's an industry that is a little bit undervalued. I mean, I've said it multiple times now, but there was a lot of clapping for the NHS, and nobody clapped for teachers. I mean, you guys are on the front line, you're risking your lives every day. We don't get to see you anymore because obviously you're having to go into school, and the risk of like sort of giving mum and dad COVID is a real life factor, isn't it? And hopefully this creates awareness and gets graduates and teachers and more people thinking about getting into the profession, because it's a profession that we need teachers for. We need.
Absolutely. Honestly, I could not. You were talking about budget. What can government do? And I think if we could raise the profile of teaching, we forget it's a graduate profession. This is a really professional job. You can't go into this job not having qualifications and have worked hard for it. And so I think people forget that. I mean, it's the most obvious thing. It is so. It's a teacher that stands up in front of you has worked their butt off to get to that point. Not only do they do their degree, they do their postgraduate course as well, and it takes intelligence to get there. And I think there's not enough credibility in the profession, and it's really important that we acknowledge that. And I think if the government could raise even basic things like the wages of teachers, make it more appealing, I think once some people become teachers, you realise the impact that you're having. Honestly, there is no job like it. And I know I'm a bit biased because I love my job, but there is nothing like it. I remember when I came home once, and my husband I had all these cards, and I think it might be Christmas or end of the year, I can't remember. And it was at the end of summer, and I had, my formal going, and I was like, oh, look at this card, and, I just love these kids so much. I was reading, and he was reading the messages, and he just went to me, just stopped. He's been in finance for forever, and he said to me, do you know what? I wish I was ever had a job where this is how I felt. And I think, it was just that point where you realise that we moan as teachers about, the marking, the reports and the data and all that stuff. But you don't realise how important your role is and the impact that you have. And I don't just mean on the students that are in front of you. Do, honestly, you do. But I don't just mean that. I mean, like, it's like a ripple. I've lived in Havering, for a really long time, and this is your community. These are the children. You're breaking a circle here. And often, when I've worked in schools that have been quite deprived, more so than I have in this current school, you see parents coming through who didn't have an education, and it's like a vicious circle. And I think our role is to break that circle, is to really raise, if I could pick any word, would be aspiration. And I think teachers are aspiring. We want to invest in those students. We want them to aspire for greater things. And I don't mean to sound pompous, because actually to say success means to have lots of money, to be a lawyer or an accountant, that's what success is, and it isn't. That's not what I mean. But to have personal growth and personal sense of accomplishment, that is the aspiration. And sometimes I tell my students, I haven't done this here today, but sometimes I tell the students the struggles I had, where life threw me some curveballs, and kids want to know that teaching isn't what it was like when it was 15-20 years ago, when you and I mean, you're younger than me, TJ, but when we were at school. But students need aspiration. They need to know that actually, do you know what, these teachers or these people in front of us, they've had hardships, they've had difficult lives, or they've had interesting lives, and if they can do it, so can we. And I think, I mean, I'm way off topic now, but the point is, being in front of those kids, you are really making a difference. That aspiration that you can literally change someone's life. I made a positive phone call home last week to this boy in my one of my classes, and I was just saying, I just want to let you know that so-and-so has worked really hard this week. I'm really impressed with their work ethic. And she said to me, the mum, and it was kind of a flip conversation because I went to say something nice, and she said to me, Miss Sharma, since I've got you on the phone, can I just tell you one thing? She said, last year, at the beginning of year 9, you said to my boy, I won't mention his name, but you said to him, listen, I don't want you to do this task. I'm going to go straight to the challenge task. Because you're so far ahead, you're going to do really well, so I want you to do that task. And she said he came home with the biggest smile on his face, and he said, Mum, guess what? Miss Sharma said I'll go straight to the challenge task. She really believes in me. And I suppose that anecdote is not a great one, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you don't realise the words that come out your mouth can literally change someone's life. And she said to me after that, every single subject that he's gone to now, he's got this kind of sense of confidence and faith in himself that he can do it. And I just thought, I didn't even realise that I said to him, do the chat. I don't remember this conversation, but that's the power of teachers. That's the power that we have. We can literally change aspirations and life and goals for these kids. And you know what, if we don't do it, who is, right?
It's
I
amazing.
hope you to rest on these kids.
Yeah, you know what, these doctors, right, they get paid. I mean, it's public sector as well, and it's crazy because ultimately, in hindsight, they get paid. Some of them get paid more, right? And it's because they save people's lives. But what people don't understand is teachers also save people's lives. Like they save these children's lives, and some of them go out and come from like such difficult backgrounds, and these teachers give them a safe place, at school, and they give them aspirations, like you said, and they give them a reason to live in some ways, don't they? And it makes such a massive impact, and it's so frustrating when, I mean, I'm not a teacher myself, but I work with so many teachers, and you work so hard in such incredibly difficult times, and it's so important that we create awareness for the teacher profession and get more people into the industry, and hopefully this podcast makes that happen. Well, hopefully it contributes at least, and I mean, you've obviously gave some fantastic advice and your opinions and your real life journey, and it's great to see somebody that I know that hasn't necessarily always come from a lot, and that's made it. Like, you obviously, you've done well, you're middle class, you've got your own house and you've got your own place, and you've got a lovely family with 3 kids. You've done exceptionally well, and you worked really hard through the education system and through becoming a teacher, and you worked your way up, and it's been great to have you on to share your journey, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks, TJ. No, it's been really lovely talking to you. I just feel like we're at home in the living room having a chit chat. So it's been really lovely. And I'm always talking about work because I'm really passionate about it, and that. But I just will leave by saying this one thing, that teaching, and I know I'm a bit biased. Like I said, I do love my job, but these kids are just amazing. I think teenagers get a bit of a bad rep sometimes because they walk around in groups and things like that, but actually, when you ever sit there and have a conversation, I say this to my classes all the time, one of the reasons I love working with young people is because as you get older, you become a little bit more narrow-minded, and you get more close with your views and ideas. But teenagers are so open-minded. You can debate and talk, and they're so opinionated, and they teach you a thing or two, trust me, and the kids that I work with are so raw and streetwise, and and I just look at them and I think, you have been through so much and you still come to school every day with a smile on your face. Like, how do you do it? And there's such an inspiration. I think we forget, we give them a bad rep and we think, they're lazy and but they're up against more than me and you can ever imagine, Teach. Social media, I know we just throw that word out there, but it really is prolific. I've got 3 teenagers. I know the influence or the damage or the success it can bring. But they live in a different world to us, whether that's virtually or reality or whatever that might be. But these kids are truly inspiring. What they need in front of them, forget everything else, forget the money and the COVID and everything else. What they need in front of them, someone that believes in them. And if you've got something that you can give whether that's your knowledge or advice, and be passionate and give them aspiration. That's all these kids need to be successful, whatever that might look like for them. So I just could not do anything else. I absolutely love being a teacher.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for obviously speaking to us and obviously sharing your journey. I mean, it's been fantastic to have you on, and guys, get into teaching.
Thanks, DJ.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Bye.